Welcome to the Power Book of Podcasts. Unlock your potential with powerful book summaries that inspire personal growth and broaden your understanding of the world. Each week, we explore life-changing ideas, from leadership to mindset strategies to keys for happiness and success. Learn actionable insights to apply in your daily life. Join our growing community of thinkers and seekers. Like, comment, and hit that subscribe button now. It's time to supercharge your mind with the Power Book of Podcasts.
Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely.
Today we're tackling Ray Dalio's Principles, Life and Work.
Oh, yeah, a classic.
We're going beyond those typical summaries you see everywhere and
Right.
really pulling out the gems that can make a real difference. Practical stuff, maybe even some surprising insights,
You bet.
all based on his real-world experiences.
For sure.
And here's something I bet a lot of people don't know. Dalio wasn't always so keen on sharing his principles.
Oh, really?
He actually only made them public
Wow.
after getting tons of positive feedback when he posted them online back in 2010.
That's interesting, isn't it? He had this whole system for success
Mm-hmm.
honed over decades.
Yeah,
And at first it was just for him in Bridgewater.
I see.
But that online response kind of showed him
Yeah,
how much people were craving this kind of practical wisdom.
totally. Yeah, it's like he was holding on to this treasure trove of knowledge
Right.
and then realized, hey, people actually really want this.
Exactly. And what's striking to me is how his early life seems like the ideal training ground for independent thinking.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Trading at 12 years old.
Mhm.
Embracing that whole counterculture of the 60s.
Right.
This isn't someone who just follows the crowd.
Definitely not. And that's really the bedrock of his entire approach.
Yeah.
Think for yourself.
Yeah, it's all about that.
He doesn't want you just blindly accepting whatever you're told.
Makes sense.
It's about actively figuring out your own goals, your own version of truth,
Right.
and then using that as the foundation for your whole life. But that's got to be way easier said than done these days, right?
Absolutely. Like, we're constantly bombarded with information now.
Yeah.
Everywhere we turn, how are we supposed to even sift through it all and figure out what's actually true? Especially when we're talking about something as complex as success.
It's overwhelming. And that's exactly where Dalio's emphasis on embracing failure comes in.
Oh.
He's all about setting these super ambitious goals, pushing your boundary, and knowing that you're going to mess up along the way. In fact, he has this whole philosophy around failing well. Failing well. That sounds so counterintuitive. Most of us are like programmed to avoid failure at all costs.
I know, right? But Dalio sees it as an essential part of the learning process.
Didn't he have a pretty massive public failure himself back in the 80s, though?
He did. In 1982, he made this huge, very public prediction about the economy.
Right.
And it turned out to be totally wrong.
Ooh.
It resulted in a massive financial setback
Yeah.
for him and for Bridgewater.
Oh, wow. That must have been brutal.
Yeah, it was a huge blow. But he actually credits that failure with shaping his whole approach to decision-making.
Really? How so?
Well, it forced him to look beyond gut feelings and intuition.
I see.
He started studying history, recognizing patterns, looking for ways to kind of systemize his decision-making process.
Interesting.
He realized he needed a more data-driven approach,
Okay.
something that could help him overcome those emotional biases that we all have. So he's basically saying we can't always trust our gut instincts.
Exactly. Especially when it comes to making big decisions.
It's like he took his finance background and applied it to life, finding ways to create algorithms that could lead to better decisions across the board.
That's fascinating. But isn't there a risk of becoming too reliant on systems and algorithms,
Right.
especially in something as nuanced as personal decision making?
You're absolutely right. It's a valid concern. And as technology keeps advancing, with AI becoming more prevalent,
Yeah.
this question becomes even more critical. Dalio's approach might seem extreme to some,
I can see that.
but I think it highlights a crucial point.
Yeah.
We can all benefit from bringing a bit more objectivity and data into our decision-making processes.
You're right. It's about finding that sweet spot between intuition and data, emotion and logic.
I like that. It's not about turning into robots.
Right.
It's about using these tools to enhance our human judgment, not replace it.
Exactly. Tools to help us make more informed choices. Let's be real, though. Reading about algorithms and systems can get a little dry.
Yeah, it can be a bit much.
That's where Dalio's personal stories really come in handy.
Well, yeah, he's got a knack for weaving in those anecdotes that make the principles come alive.
Totally. Like, who knew he was a mini entrepreneur as a kid?
Wait, really?
Running a paper route and shoveling snow for cash?
That's awesome. It shows that hustle was there from the beginning.
Exactly. Those little glimpses into his past really help make him relatable.
And I love how he got into economics.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
It wasn't through textbooks. It was because he was trying to figure out why his allowance suddenly wasn't buying as much.
Right. After Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard.
He had that natural curiosity, the desire to understand how things work on a deeper level.
And those stories aren't just about business either. He shares some pretty personal moments, too.
Oh, yeah.
Like his blind date with Barbara, who became his wife.
That's sweet. It adds this whole other dimension to him. It reminds us that he's not just a machine focused on principles.
Yeah, he's a human being with a full life outside of work.
For sure. It's a good reminder that success isn't just about numbers and algorithms.
Right. It's about relationships, experiences, those human connections that give it all meaning.
Couldn't agree more. But Dalio definitely doesn't shy away from the hard work involved either.
You're right.
He emphasizes how crucial it is to constantly learn, adapt, and evolve.
Just like the evolutionary process in nature.
Exactly. He sees this continual adaptation as crucial for both individuals and organizations. If they want to thrive in a world that's constantly changing.
And that resonates with so much of what we see in modern theories of organizational change and agility, too.
Yeah, it's all about embracing that growth mindset, being open to feedback,
right,
and constantly striving to improve.
And speaking of organizations, let's talk about Bridgewater.
Dalio's own company.
He built this whole culture around the idea of creating meaningful work and meaningful relationships.
Yeah, it's like he sees those two things as intrinsically linked. Almost two sides of the same coin.
Absolutely. It's fascinating because it speaks to this deeper human need we all have.
What's that?
We want to feel like our work has purpose.
Uh-huh.
That we're part of something bigger than ourselves.
Exactly. And we want to have genuine connections with the people we work with.
Totally. I think that really resonates with our listeners, too. You're not just here for abstract concepts.
Right.
You're looking for ways to make your work more meaningful. I find that sense of purpose and connection.
But getting there requires honesty.
Right. Absolutely. Being real with ourselves and others.
And that's where Dalio's emphasis on radical truth and transparency comes in.
Oh, yeah. He's super adamant about creating a culture where people can openly share their thoughts and ideas, even if they're critical or controversial.
It's about creating that space for open dialogue.
And this ties directly back to his idea of an idea meritocracy.
Right, where the best ideas rise to the top regardless of who they come from.
So no sugarcoating, no office politics, just laying it all out there.
Exactly. Being upfront and honest.
But how does that actually work in practice? Wouldn't that just lead to chaos and conflict?
A valid question. It's definitely a tricky balance. That's actually where things get really interesting.
We'll dive deeper into that idea of meritocracy and how Dalio tries to make it work.
Yeah.
In the next part of our deep dive.
Sounds good.
But before we get there, let's explore another aspect of his approach that might surprise you.
I'm intrigued already.
His fascination with understanding how people are wired differently.
Oh, wow. That's a whole other can of worms.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Ray Dalio's principles.
All right, picking up where we left off.
Last time we were talking about Dalio's fascination with understanding how people are wired differently.
Yeah, he's really into that.
Big on personality assessments, even creating those baseball cards for employees.
Baseball cards.
Yeah, highlighting their strengths and weaknesses. It's like he's trying to bring this data-driven approach to something as complex as human personality.
He is bringing a certain level of objectivity to the process, for sure.
Yeah.
He believes that really understanding people's wiring, their natural tendencies, their strengths, is absolutely crucial for putting them in roles where they can truly thrive. And those baseball cards, as unusual as they sound,
for sure,
are just one way that he tries to make that understanding more concrete and actionable.
Interesting approach. I can see how that would be helpful in a way.
It's definitely unique. But let's shift gears a bit.
Okay.
And talk about Dalio's famous 5-step process for making effective decisions.
The one he's known for.
We touched on it briefly earlier, but I'm really excited to break it down and see how we can apply it to our everyday lives.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of practical wisdom there.
Totally. So it's a framework that can be applied to pretty much anything, from big career choices, those everyday dilemmas we all face.
Exactly. Big or small, it can help. And it all starts with step 1, setting clear goals. That seems simple enough.
Right.
But Dalio makes a really good point that people often overlook this step.
Oh, I agree.
We get so caught up in the day-to-day
The daily grind, yeah.
that we lose sight of the bigger picture.
Totally. It's so easy to fall into that trap. We get busy.
Yeah, reacting to problems, and suddenly we're just going through the motions, not really moving towards anything specific.
And then you wonder why you don't feel fulfilled.
Exactly. Dalio would say that's a recipe for feeling lost and unfulfilled.
Makes sense.
Right.
So it's not just about having a vague idea of what you want. It's about defining those goals with clarity and intention.
Being specific about what you're aiming for.
Okay, so we've got our goals in sight. What's next?
Step 2. Identifying and not tolerating problems.
Okay, that one might feel a little less inspiring.
Yeah, not as glamorous maybe?
But Dalio actually argues that problems are opportunities in disguise.
Interesting way to look at it.
He even compares them to coal being thrown into a locomotive engine. Fuel for progress. I like that analogy.
So instead of avoiding problems, we need to actively seek them out and face them head on.
Exactly. He's got this strategy he calls tasting the soup.
Tasting the soup, what's that?
Where he encourages leaders to constantly sample different parts of their organization. Talking to people at all levels to get a firsthand sense of what's working and what's not.
Interesting.
It's about being proactive, not waiting for things to blow up.
Getting ahead of those problems.
All right, so it's about actively seeking out information and feedback,
Right.
even if it's uncomfortable.
Not shying away from the tough stuff.
But once you've identified a problem, then what?
Then it's on to step 3. Diagnosis.
Diagnosis, okay.
This is where you put on your detective hat and get to the root cause of the problem.
Really dig deep.
Not just treating the symptoms, but figuring out those underlying factors that are contributing to the issue.
Getting to the heart of it.
So it's about asking why multiple times.
Like a curious kid.
Like a curious kid who won't stop till they get to the bottom of things.
I love that.
But how do you actually do that in a systematic way?
Dalio offers a helpful framework for that.
Okay, lay it on me.
First, you determine if the outcome is good or bad. Okay.
Simple enough.
Then you figure out who's responsible for that outcome.
All right.
And if it's a bad outcome,
Yeah.
you dig deeper.
Right.
Is it due to the person's capabilities, or is there a flaw in the system itself?
So you're looking at both the individual and the context they're operating in.
It's not about placing blame.
Right.
It's about understanding the interplay between individuals and the systems they're working within.
It's a much more nuanced and honestly more compassionate approach
Yeah.
than just pointing fingers.
Totally. And that leads us to step 4, design.
All right. Design time to brainstorm and come up with some solutions.
Exactly. This is where the creative problem solving happens.
But I'm guessing Dalio doesn't advocate for just any solution, right?
You guessed it? He pushes you to visualize different machines and their potential outcomes.
Machines.
It's a metaphor he uses.
Okay, got it.
To really think through different scenarios and play them out in your mind
Yeah.
before committing to a specific course of action.
It's like running simulations.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And he wants you to consider the second and third order consequences.
Those unintended ripple effects that often catch people off guard.
So it's about thinking long-term, anticipating potential pitfalls.
Right.
And not getting so fixated on the immediate outcome that you miss the bigger picture. That makes a lot of sense. But having a great plan is one thing.
Yeah.
Actually executing it is another.
Absolutely. Ideas are cheap action is what matters.
And that brings us to step 5, right?
You got it. Do what you set out to do.
That might seem obvious.
It does.
But it's where a lot of people really struggle.
Totally. It requires discipline, follow through, and a willingness to push through obstacles and setbacks.
The real test.
So it's not just about having that brilliant idea. Yeah. It's about turning that idea into concrete action.
And that often means doing the less glamorous stuff.
It's about those good old-fashioned work habits, being organized, prioritizing tasks, relentlessly pursuing your goals.
And Dalio is also a big believer in delegation and teamwork.
Oh, for sure.
He knows that no one can do everything themselves.
Yeah, that's true.
It's about recognizing your own strengths and weaknesses and building a team that complements your abilities.
So you can cover all the bases.
Okay, so we've got this system for setting goals, identifying problems, diagnosing them, designing solutions, and putting those solutions into action.
Comprehensive approach.
But all of this hinges on the people involved, right?
Definitely. You need the right people on board.
How does Dalio go about finding the right people for his idea meritocracy. Last time we were talking about Dalio's idea meritocracy.
Right. Finding those right people.
But even with a perfect team, you're bound to have some disagreements.
Yeah, that's just human nature. How does he handle that? Especially when everyone is supposed to be so radically truthful.
Well, he actually sees conflict as a good thing.
Oh, really?
He believes it's essential for strong relationships and good decision-making.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Think about it if everyone's always agreeing.
Are you really getting the best ideas out there?
Probably not. Groupthink can be dangerous.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
But how do you keep those disagreements productive?
Good question.
I mean, I can see how easily they could turn into personal attacks.
Yeah, or devolve into shouting matches.
That's where the idea meritocracy really comes in.
Right. It's not just about arguing, it's a system.
So remind us again what it's all about.
It's about letting the best ideas win, regardless of who they come from.
Okay, so in theory, it sounds great. But can it actually work in the real world?
Dalio would say absolutely. It's not easy. It takes a very specific kind of culture.
What do you mean?
One that's built on radical truth and transparency.
Which we've talked about. But also on clear principles.
Right.
And guidelines for how to actually have those tough conversations.
So it's not just a free-for-all.
So there's some structure to it.
Exactly. At Bridgewater, they have this whole culture of rigorous debate.
Okay, so tell me how that works.
People are expected to challenge each other's ideas.
Even if
those ideas come from someone with more experience or authority.
Whoa. That sounds kind of intense.
It can be. But Dalio believes that tension is actually productive.
Really?
He thinks it forces people to think harder, to defend their positions, and to be open to new perspectives.
I guess that makes sense. But how do you make sure it doesn't go too far?
That's a crucial point. You need psychological safety.
What does that mean exactly?
People have to feel like they can speak up without fear of being punished or ridiculed.
Okay, so you need to create that safe space. But how do you make sure everyone's voice is actually heard?
Another great question.
Yeah.
Not just the loudest or the most senior person in the room.
Right, exactly.
Well, one of the ways Dalio tries to do this is through something he calls believability-weighted decision-making.
Believability-weighted? That sounds complicated.
It's not that complicated. It's basically a system where people's opinions are valued based on their track record.
Okay, so their expertise in a certain area.
Right. Someone who's consistently made good calls in the past might have more weight than someone who's brand new to the team.
Makes sense.
Or someone who hasn't really demonstrated that same level of expertise.
So it's not about silencing anyone.
No, not at all.
It's about putting their opinions into context.
And get this, Dalio even uses technology to help track this.
Seriously?
They have these systems that gather data on people's past performance.
Wow, so it's really data-driven.
And they use that data to inform decision-making.
That's next level. But doesn't that create a risk of people just going along with whatever's already happening?
Yeah, not wanting to rock the boat.
Because they know their opinion might be downweighted.
That's a valid concern, and that's where the human element comes in again.
I knew it.
Technology can be a helpful tool.
Yeah.
But it can't replace good judgment and the ability to recognize when a dissenting opinion might actually be the most valuable one. We need that critical thinking.
We do.
It's all about balance, isn't it?
Always.
Between data and intuition systems and human judgment.
But what happens when there's just a fundamental disagreement?
Yeah. Like even after all the debating and believability weighting.
That's where those core principles come in.
The ones we talked about earlier.
Exactly. Having that shared set of principles is crucial for resolving those tough disagreements and moving forward as a team.
It's like a foundation to build on.
So it's almost like having a constitution for your organization.
I like that analogy.
A set of guiding principles that everyone can refer back to when things get heated.
A shared understanding of what's important.
And Dalio emphasizes that this principles document isn't set in stone.
Right. It's not just a rule book.
It's constantly evolving through debate and consensus building.
So it's a living, breathing document.
Exactly. It reflects the collective wisdom and experience of the whole team.
And that takes constant communication.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And that brings us back to the importance of radical transparency.
Full circle.
Remember, Dalio is all about recording meetings? Sharing feedback, openly making data accessible to everyone.
That sounds intense. I can imagine a lot of people would feel uncomfortable with that level of exposure.
It's definitely not for the faint of heart.
But Dalio argues that this radical transparency is essential for building trust, fostering accountability, and ultimately creating a more equitable and effective organization.
It's about shining a light on everything.
Getting rid of those shadows where politics and hidden agendas can thrive.
Exactly. Bringing everything out into the open, even if it gets a little uncomfortable.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today. From Dalio's unconventional childhood to his data-driven decision-making process.
It's been a journey.
His emphasis on meaningful work and relationships and that controversial idea, meritocracy.
A lot to think about. What do you think our listeners should take away from all this? What's the one big idea they could apply to their own life?
I think the biggest takeaway, whether you agree with all of Dalio's methods or not, is the power of having a clear set of principles.
Having that foundation.
He's shown us that thinking deeply about what you believe.
Right.
And then making those beliefs explicit can be incredibly powerful.
It's about taking control.
It's about taking ownership of your life.
Yeah.
Designing a system that aligns with your values. And then using that system to make better decisions, achieve your goals.
And live a more meaningful life.
Well said. It's not easy. It requires that constant reflection and adaptation.
It's a process.
But I think Dalio would say the rewards are well worth the effort.
Absolutely. And if you're listening and feeling inspired to dive deeper, we highly recommend checking out Dalio's book.
There's so much more in there.
It's packed with thought-provoking ideas and practical strategies that can help you approach life and work with more intention and clarity.
And remember, the journey of self-discovery and growth is ongoing.
Never stops.
Keep questioning. Keep learning.
And keep diving.
Until next time, happy diving, everyone.